Thank you for joining me on another episode of The Art of Comic Writing. I'm your host, Jorge Medina. That's George with a J. And before we start this show, I'm going to ask you all to subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe to the channel. Like the content. And even more importantly, I need you to share this. I need you to share this video out to anyone who has ever attempted to write a book, a comic, a poem, a haiku, as we're going to be talking about writing for all my literary lovers out there. Oh, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of these informative shows. Okay, it is now time to thank the sponsor of today's show, and that is our friends at Gig. Do you have the next best-selling comic book idea, but have no idea how to get started because you're an artist and not a writer, or vice versa? Then go to globalindiegroup.com and find exactly what you're looking for. Gig has a list of writers, artists, editors, colorists, letterers, even podcasts on the platform to help you bring that comic book to life. Sign up today to get started and make sure you provide the promo code WRITING at checkout. What are you waiting for? Go to globalindiegroup.com today and get started on the next best-selling comic book you've been wanting to create. Remember when you were a young whippersnapper? Remember driving your parents crazy because you knew it all and you were untouchable? Remember that little person? Remember a little writer who one day was going to write a best-selling novel? Do you remember challenging everything and thinking you had all the time in the world? What if you could go back in time and sit down with that little writer? What would you tell them? What sage advice would you share? Would they even listen? Today on the show, we're going to go back in time and ask our guests just that question and discuss what would we tell our young writing self. Plus, you already know, we're going to be giving him a writing prompt as homework. That's right. Okay, my guest has written a number of stories in various genres and mediums over the last decade. His previous book, Reloader, is a cyberpunk comic that was successfully kickstarted. He has a profound love of character-driven stories. He works on a YouTube channel called The Writist, where he analyzes story structure in video games. And in his latest comic, Noir, a 1940s horror comic with aliens, he gets to combine two of his favorite genres, noir and sci-fi. Please help me welcome Mr. Tony James.
Hey.
What's up, Tony?
What's up, man? How are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm exhausted. I'm running a marathon Kickstarter campaign right now, so I'm
Yes,
starting to
you
finish.
are. Yes, you are, man. Noir. Listen, I got the first issue. Great book. Great book. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I can't wait to see what the second one brings because it's number two. It's number two that you have on right now. But yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on, man, and doing this.
Yeah.
For those who have been watching the show, the way this thing is going to go is that Tony and I are going to talk about writing. I'm going to ask him a bunch of questions regarding writing. He's going to give us his input, his insight, and we're going to have a little discussion back and forth. And then before the show ends, and Tony, I don't think you know this, I'm going to leave you with a writing prompt, okay? I'm going to leave you, Tone, with a writing prompt, and the audience, if you guys want to take part in it. Tony doesn't know what the prompt is. I'll tell him right before we end the show, and then we'll go from there. So why don't we get started, Tony? Let's get going here. All right. First question. All right. Were there any authors or books that you didn't like or hated, but in your writing journey you've grown to appreciate? Was there anything like that?
Well, as far as authors, it's probably my own work that I hated and then grew to appreciate later. Usually if I pick up something by a writer and I'm just not into it, I'll just put it down and move on to something else. But like things that I have appreciation for later, it's definitely like my earliest work. I mean, when you start out writing, you're pretty much just all ideas and you lack a lot of execution. So I would go, looking back on those, I appreciate the ambition, the vision that I had for a lot of those stories, and that just how much work needed to be done under the hood to get the execution right so that people would actually connect with the ideas that I was trying to bring forth.
Ah, it's interesting, man. Yeah, I did not expect you to tell me that. That's awesome. That's an
Yeah.
awesome answer, dude. So yeah, so that was, and you know, when you say that, as soon as you said that, I was like, damn, you're right. Because as a younger writer, and this is gonna go into a question later on, but yeah, as a young writer, you really kind of like are just you really don't know what you're doing. But
Mhm.
and I think I think you have a lot of talent, but
Yeah.
like you said, the execution is what you're lacking. And sometimes I say sometimes, you know, knowledge, I mean, knowledge is power, ignorance is bliss. So when
Mhm.
you're young, you're just writing just because you love to write, right? But knowledge, the knowledge of what writing is what makes you that writer that you want to become. That's awesome, dude. That's
Yeah.
great. That's
And when
great.
you and when you're first starting as a writer, you there's just kind of this kind of allure with writing where you think it's very easy. You just well, I can put two characters in a room, I can give them some conflict. But as you kind of like write more and study story structure more, you realize that there is a lot
Mm,
more going on beneath the surface. There is more to character dialogue than you first realize. There's more to plot points and reversals and how the relationship between the way that where the story starts and how it ends. And you really don't only learn that just by learning and studying story structure.
so let me ask you this. So I'll ask you this question next. Then, if
Mhm.
you could tell your younger writing self anything, right? And I guess that's part. You know what? Let's save it because that'll be like the main one. I want to really dive into that. So we'll save that.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about comics, right?
Sure.
Comic book writing. So, how did you come up with the title for your book? I know you did a book before this one, but Star Noir, like for example, that book. How did you come up with the title for that book? Because for me, I find that's one of the hardest things for me to do, dude, is find a good title. Something's going to grab the audience. How did you come up with it?
Well, just trying to find a title that could best describe the mashup of the two genres, science fiction and noir, and then
Mm,
also trying to find something that was like it was just fun to say. So there were just I can't remember like the bad titles that I had, but the
yeah.
second I said Star Noir, I was like, "Oh, that's fun. Oh, that's fun
Mhm.
to say. I want to say that again." And then so much of the vision of what the comic would be kind of fed off of what that title was, and sort of and part of the vision was just trying to fit it, just trying to kind of fit with that Star Noir title, just be the embodiment of that title.
Yeah, that's interesting, dude. I'm curious to see what the failed titles were of the book. That's also cool to see, like the
Yeah.
behind the scenes stuff. Like, what was it that didn't make the cut? There are a number of actual like big time books that had different titles before the title that we came to know, and I can't remember any at the top of my head, but I remember reading about some books that weren't what they came to be. They were something completely different. So that's interesting.
Mhm.
Now, do you write prose, Tony?
I don't write prose. As practices, I write haikus. Um,
Oh, okay.
those are very kind of they're usually kind of self affirmations, but writing them in a haiku form allows me to be very creative with it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I will just take an object and just describe it in excruciating detail. Uh, you know, if it's a sword, say anything, but it's a sword. Just describe it in as much detail as you can.
Nice, nice. So the reason why I ask you that is because, okay, so when writing a comic script, right,
Yeah.
is it hard for you to now dial back the amount of description you put into your panels for the artist, or do you leave that up to them? Like, how heavy are you into the description when you're writing your scripts? I guess.
Well, I mean, it's definitely evolved over time to be less and less. The first artist I ever worked with my cyberpunk comic, I
Mhm.
would have just like really big, thick descriptions, just describing everything that you would see in it, and that drove the artist absolutely nuts. So I do not recommend doing that.
Yeah.
But with the more artists I got to work with, it really just became just focusing on each panel. There is one thing that we're looking at. There is one action that is happening in that panel, and just really just drilling down into what that one thing is, and then letting the artist frame that. So as long as you see the killer walk in on the last panel, it really doesn't matter that it wasn't the overhead shot that you were envisioning in your head because it still works in the flow of the page. So you just sort of focus on the end result and not how we got there.
Yeah, it's funny. I think we think, or we when we're telling stories, we think of moving images in our head.
Yeah.
So everything is moving as we're reading. But when we're writing comics, we have to focus on that one. Just freeze that frame, and
Yeah.
that's what we're telling. And I think sometimes that's kind of hard to do. And the reason why I asked you if you wrote prose, because sometimes it's hard to do when you're writing prose, because in prose you have to describe everything,
Yeah.
and you have to, like you said, you have to have those paragraphs worth of description for
Yeah.
the reader to kind of turn the page. When it comes to comics, it's completely different because
Right.
the art is going to give the people what they're seeing, right? So they can turn the page. So, but was it tough? Like once you send them these. Was it hard to kind of dial it back, or were you like, oh, thank God, I don't have to write all that. Okay, I got it. I'll just give you that.
It really was just kind of I guess kind of a relief, I guess, in a way, because you just once you know what you're supposed to be putting in each of these panels and what is the most important information, you just drill down into that information. It's like, okay, well, if you don't need to know what the color of the leaves were, or how big that tree was, or how many, you just leave all that stuff out and you just focus, like, okay, he's sitting at this typewriter, like let's make sure that that's there, and if there's an expression, make sure that expression is called out as well. But everything else, you just let it go, because you know that the artist is just going to come up with their own thing anyway, so you just focus on what the most important things are to see in each panel.
Yeah. So you don't give them like camera angles or anything like that.
No.
You kind of let them play with how they wanna how they
Yeah.
wanna draw or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree, man. I think unless I'm seeing something specific and I want like maybe like a worm's eye view or something because you want to show the power of this
Yeah.
character or something like that, I kind of leave that up to the artist. I'm the same as you. I just kind of leave it alone and
Yeah.
let them kind of
Yeah.
be creative and do what they do.
Yeah, as long as the emotion and the vibe that you're looking for is in there, it's comparable to what you're looking for. Getting caught up in the specifics of, like, this was my specific vision, when it still works, it still has the vibe you want, it still has the effect that you want. Yeah, you let go of the small stuff.
What about for the colorist? Do you give the colorist any direction within the panel when you're writing?
I just tell them the general vibe of what the color palette for the whole book is supposed to be. I mean, with Star Noir, my new book, it's set in the 1940s, so I wanted to have a very vintage look.
Mm.
So I was showing the colorist a lot of comic books, like Black Sad. There's this other one by I think it's Boom Studios. It's called Hit. That's also a 1940s comic, and both of those books have a very kind of like very, very vintage style that kind of really fits with the time. And just telling the chorus, just in your own way, just sort of like emulate something like that, and then they
Yeah.
come up with their own version, and it looks great.
Yeah, there you go. You got to trust the team at
Yeah.
some point.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about like writing like Star Noir. Let's focus on that one for a second on this question.
Yeah.
Can you remember what was the hardest scene in that book or in the scripts that you've written for the book that you ever had to write? And what was it and what was difficult about it?
The
And, and,
hardest
it,
thing.
and tell them it doesn't have to be this book. I just have that book in mind. It doesn't have to be that, but yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, but this book actually has a good one.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there is a club scene in where which one of our singers, Estella Belafonte, she sings this big torch song. And writing lyrics to music was really difficult, because you don't have a melody. The reader is not going to hear one, so you have to come up with the right cadence, and the right kind of flow of the lyrics from panel to panel. And it's just harder than just dialogue. Dialogue, you're just trying to find the most direct route to get the emotion or elicit the information about a particular character. But music lyrics, that's just a whole, like, separate skill set altogether. So trying to write a scene that starts with normal dialogue, and then has this big musical number in the middle of it, where you have to come up with lyrics, and they have to be believable enough for the reader to go, like, I buy this song, I buy that they would be listening to this. That was incredibly difficult. I'm still not sure if those lyrics are the best that they can be.
Wow. So you had to write actual lyrics
Yeah.
and no music to the lyrics. So now it's all just lyrics on the page.
Yeah.
Oh, dude,
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny because I think you could have gone the route of maybe just quoting lyrics from a song, right?
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
that, I mean, I don't know how that would work in comics. I don't know if that's copyright infringement, but but to come up with your own stuff. Now, how long is that scene? Like, how long is she up on stage? Like, How long
I
was that?
mean, she is only singing for 2 pages.
Mm,
We kinda cut back and forth between the 2 detectives that are there to see her, while she's doing her song, and by the 2nd page, she's wrapped up, and we're moved on to a more traditional dialogue between her and the 2 detectives. But yeah, you kinda start with, some kind of basis, like in the movie The Big Sleep. Lauren Bacall, she's singing with a bunch of piano people, and she's
mhm,
singing this song. And I took the melody of that and used that as a basis to create the cadence for the lyrics,
mm,
so that there
mhm.
was there was it was working from some sort of musical idea.
Did you share that with the artist? Did you say, okay, this is what I kind of was looking or thinking of?
I think I shared it with the artist. I definitely shared it with the letterer because I wanted to make sure that he was kind of placing everything, because it's not just the lyrics that are being sung. There are also like trumpets and drums and pianos.
Wow,
So I wanted him to know where I originally started with the song,
that's
so that
awesome.
he could kind of fit each piece to kind of be just a believable tune.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I'm trying to envision did you now for that scene, were you specific about where to place the camera? Is it the trumpets? Is it the piano? Is it, or did you kind of say, hey, almost like what Marvel used to do, just this is what's happening on this page, go ahead and go for it. Did you break that down?
I broke down certain lyrics because one of them is like a big punchline. It's
Mhm.
a slow build of a song about an abusive husband, and then the punchline is that she poisons his dinner.
Ooh,
So the line where she says like it was the last meal he would eat. I knew that one was like that has to be a big panel. It's kind of like the lighting on the stage goes from this one singular spotlight, and then when she hits that line, the whole stage lights up. You see the whole band. It's this kind of big kind of pose thing, and that's when she hits the line. So it was really just trying to make sure that like certain spots like hit correctly for the song that we were singing. But everything else about camera angles and stuff, like I totally left that up to the artist.
dude, that's awesome, bro. It's got a really cinematic kind of feel.
Yeah.
Like when you,
Mhm.
as you're describing it, it just feels very cinematic.
Mhm.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, cool. So now let's do a little something different. What I want to do here is, this is the topic of the show, right? This is what we're going to talk about. This is why I wanted to say this, because I thought this was very interesting.
Mhm.
And what we're talking about here is, what would you, if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be? What would be the advice that you would give your younger self?
Um, be patient. Trees take a long time to bear fruit.
Mm,
That's what I would tell myself. I think I mean, even still now, I'm such a rush to be better than I am, and I'm very hyper aware of my flaws as a writer. That when I first started writing, it just like you would write a scene and it's just absolute garbage. And I was so aware of it. There was not like I think this is a great scene, and I handed it to someone. They're like, "This is a garbage scene." I'm like, "No, I know. I read it out loud. I read it to myself. Like I know it's bad." And I would get frustrated that in 2 drafts that this wasn't like the most amazing story ever. But yeah, just over time, it got a little bit better. The more I read about story structure, the more scripts that I wrote, things just kind of got better and started to click. And then now we have Star Noir that really kind of breaks through the internet noise. And it's just, yeah, just be patient. It takes a long time for trees to bear fruit.
yeah. Do you like? And I know you mentioned you go back and you read some of the stuff. Where do you find the most that you had the most trouble back then? Like, what was it that gave you the hardest time when
It
you
it
were
really was just execution. Everything that kind of goes into selling your idea to a reader, just how a character elicits emotion, how a mystery unfolds, how a scene kind of is a tit for tat and ends on this big beat. Just planning everything out, having dialogue just feel like action. Characters don't say what they mean; they project constantly what their flaws are onto other characters. Um, and I wouldn't have any of that. I would just have this great, compelling, high concept that when you tell people, like, "Oh my god, that's so great! I definitely would like to see like a comic or a movie about that." But the
Mhm.
problem is that when I gave them the script, they were really bored. They will lose focus because I didn't have the key story structure down. I didn't learn any of that stuff until much later.
Right. And there's the patience, right? That's the
Yeah.
patience. Those are the things that you have to learn. Are there any of these like stories from back then that you would consider revisiting today with what you know now? Have you thought about maybe bringing some to life now?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, one of my first scripts was pretty awesome of an idea, and I really think the only problem was it's just like I was a much terrible I was a much more terrible writer back then. But I think now I could re-envision that concept and it would be far more compelling than I was trying to make
Mhm.
it like 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird. It's strange how much you learn and how much. I mean, you've been doing this from whatever 10 years, right? 10 years
Yeah.
you've been doing this,
Yeah.
and in those 10 years, it sounds like you've learned a lot about the craft of
Yeah.
writing. What were some of like maybe the books that you would recommend a younger writer, or what were some of how did you get to where you are today? Like what were some of the things you did to get there, and what were you reading to get there?
Man, I have read just about every writing book that you can think of. You name it, I have probably read it, and I might even actually have it on my shelf.
Right.
I started with Save the Cat. Like that was my first book, and I know the criticism of that book. It's if you're trying to ride a bike, Save the Cat is basically training wheels. It'll give you a feel for like how to write a competent story, but it is a specific way to write a story, and you kind of really have to challenge every idea that is told in that book. But there's another book that I like called Into the Woods.
Hmm.
It's by John York.
Hmm.
And what I love about that book is that it takes all of the popular writing books, like The Writer's Journey, even Save the Cat, and it cross-examines the ideas that of story structure, and it challenges every single one of those things. It's almost the book to read after you've read all of those other ones, because then it
Right.
kind of calls out and challenges everything.
How do you feel about the book, The Hero's Journey? Like, do you find it? Because I had a conversation about that book, and it was like, do you think that that's what's kind of like it's made everything sound the same? Because every journey, like in other words, if you read that book and you know that book, you know that the hero's journey has to go through, almost like an arc or whatever, and then everybody writes the same way. Do you feel that way about it, or do you think it's a helpful book for a reader to, a writer to read, a young
It's
writer?
not it's definitely helpful for a new writer. I think the problem with the hero's journey and just how it's kind of seen in the writing culture, or how it's kind of applied in the writing culture, is that it's just it's treated like one specific blueprint that just caters to every story. And then also there are a lot of steps in that writer's journey, in that hero's journey, but you don't have to use all of those. You can use some of them. It can go in reverse order. Like you can so long as that a character that you show us in the beginning is completely changed by the end of that, that's what matters. And everything in there is just you just pick things based on the needs of the story. So I can see how things can be kind of samey sounding if you're a writer and you're like, I have to do every single step in this hero's journey, or else it's not a good story. But the truth is that your hero's journey for your character is different for my character. So you just have to choose the things that best fit your story.
Yeah, good advice, man. Good advice. Do you find yourself using these things as you're writing? Do you find like is it almost like second nature to you at this point?
I think all my writing knowledge is really just an amalgam of just everything I've read over the last 10 years. Like I feel like the way I approach dialogue is from these they're called blue books.
Hmm.
I forget the name of the writer, but like he does like action one. He did a dialogue one, and just explaining about how like dialogue is just action. I don't tell you that I want a glass of water. Like I say I'm really thirsty, or I don't say it directly. I say it indirectly so that the reader goes, that character's thirsty. Um, but then I take action scenes that I've learned from I think maybe it was Robert McKee, maybe his book,
Hmm.
um, seeing how action scenes are just a reversal. The character grabs the gun, but then he points it at the other character and it clicks empty. And then he throws the gun at the other character and it hits him in the head. And then he goes to lunge at that guy, but then falls over the railing. So there's like a back and forth that keeps going. Uh, but yeah, everything that I've kind of learned at this point is really just a combination of all of those things that I've read over the last 10 years.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, dude. And that's what it is. I think as a young writer or as a person who's learning to write or wanting to write, I think you have to build an arsenal of all these things, right? So that you have ammunition in your mind. Okay, I know what to do here. I know what to do there. I know you're not stuck. And it's not just like you said, as a young self, you have just great ideas, but you don't know how to execute them. And I think that is key, man. That is key. And that is awesome, awesome, awesome
Mhm.
advice, man. Good
Yeah.
stuff, my brother. Good stuff. All right, well, listen, we are down now to our last question. This is the bonus question, really, is what it
Okay.
is. It's the bonus question. You ready? So
Yeah.
the bonus question here is, what's your favorite YouTube channel, Tony? And why is it Get Your Meds? That's the final question. That's the bonus question.
Get your meds. Is it? Do you seriously want to know what my favorite YouTube channel is?
Yes, give it to me.
Oh,
Why not?
okay. Um, man. Well, it's a kind of defunct YouTube channel. It was great while it lasted for. It was called Lessons from the Screenplay.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Is
yeah,
that is that around anymore? Because that sounds dope. Like I would
yeah.
definitely check that.
I,
It's
I
still
thi- I'm
around.
pretty, su- I'm pretty sure that channel is still up. I just think that the
Okay.
guy hasn't uploaded. I think he
Oh,
moved on to other stuff. But
okay.
but what I loved about it is that he would, um, take something from some popular movie like The Avengers or something, and make an argument based on a writing book. A lot of my book recommendations came from that channel. So if you're a young writer and you want to learn like lessons from the screenplay, go look that up.
That's cool.
Like yeah, there's so many videos you can pull from, and everyone has like a book recommendation, and usually the book that he recommends, you definitely need to go read that book.
Right. Awesome, dude. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good stuff, dude. That's good stuff. All right. Final thing, Tone. Final thing. I'm gonna have a writing prompt. Okay. Now you
Mhm.
don't have to do this. Obviously, it's just for fun. But if you do decide to do it, basically, it's just sit down for 15 minutes. You can write you can write a scene. You can write a short story. You can write a haiku poem. Whatever you want to write about this particular prompt. Okay. An open window in an empty apartment. That's it. An open window in an empty apartment. Run with that. For those watching, if you guys want to get down with that, go for it. But that's it, man. That's all we got. That was cool, bro. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for doing this. I appreciate this.
that zipped right by.
Yeah, dude. Fast, fast. It was fast. But yeah, no, I absolutely appreciate you coming on. Very, very valuable information for those watching. Make sure you check it out. You do have a Kickstarter, and I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But Tone, thank you so much for coming on the show. And yeah, no, I'll see you hopefully at a convention soon, because that was
Yeah,
kind of fun.
absolutely. I'm gonna start making my rounds with my new book, so you'll probably see me again.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
All right, man. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. 3, 2, 1. And that, my friends, was Tony James. He actually has a Kickstarter right now for his book, Star Noir. You guys have to check it out. I picked up the first issue of the book on Kickstarter when he did it last, and now he's doing his second book. The campaign ends on the 17th. That's this Friday. So make sure you grab yourselves a copy by pre-ordering the book on Kickstarter. The link's going to be on the show notes, so check that out. But also, in the comments, tell me what you thought about some of the things we were talking about, some of the advice, some of the books that he mentioned. I thought that was a very informative conversation we had. And so, thank you so much, Tony, for being on the show. Don't forget, everyone, make sure that you pick up his book. It's on Kickstarter right now until the 17th. He should have been, we should be, hitting that funding goal as of this recording. So, let's make it happen for him. He's a great dude. It was a fun time, great conversation. Also, don't forget the writing prompt. If you want to get down with the get down, if you want to get down with that writing prompt, remember an open window in an empty apartment. An open window in an empty apartment. What happened in an apartment? Why is the window open? Think about it. Do your thing. 15 minutes. Sit down. Either write a short story, or if you're a comic book writer, write a scene, maybe something like that. Send the script over. If you're comfortable with it and you want me to publish it or print it or show it to people, it will be on the website. It won't be printed. It will be on the website so they can check it out. Let me know. My email address is going to be in the show notes as well. And that way you can send me that information. Plus, don't forget, next week we will have another show. And our next week is a young lady by the name of Lori Calcaterra. Maybe you've heard of her, maybe you haven't, but you should check out her book, Path of the Pale Rider, which is out now. You can check out her website. We will talk to her next week. You'll have all her information next week, but definitely make sure you check that out. Again, thank you, Tony James. Thank you for coming on. Check out his book, Star Noir. It's on Kickstarter. Don't forget the prompt. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share. Thank you again, guys, for coming on, for checking out the channel, for binging. If you haven't, if you just watch all the shows that I have on there now, thank you for checking that out. And don't forget, keep writing. Peace.